Is it a good ending? Is it a bad ending? Is it proving that JJK fandom has the lowest possible reading comprehension scores humanly imaginable? Well, these are all questions that people are desperately trying to answer in the wake of Chapter 24 of Majulo officially leaking. And I'm gonna be fully real with you guys, it's not perfect, but unfortunately it does also make sense. Nothing that happens in this chapter falls outside of the purview of what's been set up over the course of the last 23 chapters. But it is, a bit Disney Kaizen-esque. But at the same time, Chapter 24 sets up that the ending isn't all sunshine and rainbows. Well, yes, since last week's release of Chapter 23, people have said that Maru's curse techniques are kind of out of nowhere and just a convenient way to wrap up what was supposed to be a 30-chapter story, while there is still a whole lot of convenience continuing to happen in Chapter 24. A very real problem has popped up for the members of the Loomer tribe, as Maru's scattering of the souls has put their religion in crisis. Mix all that together with a beloved character making their first ever Majulo appearance. And yeah, well, some people are probably not gonna like what happens in Chapter 24. I personally am kind of a fan of it. With all that said, we should talk about what actually happens in the chapter. So with no further ado, let's get directly into Chapter 24 of Majulo Explained. But before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you guys are looking for one additional Nick video every single week, guys, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. Naruto vs. Neji has begun. So, Chapter 24 kind of starts exactly how you would anticipate Chapter 24 to start. See, for those of you who don't remember, Chapter 23 ended with Maru, Cross, Tsurugi, and Yuka kicking off the Ritual of Harmony. Now, this Ritual of Harmony is supposed to accomplish a couple of very different things. The first thing that it's meant to accomplish is the eradication of all cursed spirits in Japan, which is why at the end of Chapter 23 we saw tons of orbs of light ascending towards the sky. Maru was accomplishing the eradication of all cursed spirits by drawing their cursed energy into the passageway of souls, at which point he would reshape the souls that resided in each and every single one of the cursed spirits and eliminate as much cursed energy from them as possible. And considering the fact that cursed spirits are made from cursed energy, if 99.9% of their cursed energy is eradicated, then they would simply cease to exist, at least in a physical way, as cursed spirits can exist in a non-physical way. However, once they get enough cursed energy, they physically manifest. On top of this, in order to ensure that Loomer tribesmen no longer conflate cursed spirits with Kalyans, while manipulating the passageway of souls, Maru scattered the color of all of the souls on Earth. See, the reason that Loomer tribesmen mixed up the Kalyan and the cursed spirits is because apparently the souls that reside inside of cursed spirits share the same soul color as Loomer tribesmen and Kalyans, and this is why Kalyans didn't attack the Loomer tribesmen back in Cimmeria. And therefore, if Maru scattered the color of the souls of every living being on Earth, including the Loomer tribesmen, humanity, cursed spirits, and the Kalyans, there would no longer be this connecting force between the Loomer tribesmen and the Kalyans, meaning that the Kalyans would now treat the Loomer tribesmen like they treat everybody else. That is to say, they would attack them. However, because of this, the rip between the Cimmerians and humanity would be closed on account of the fact that Loomer tribesmen would no longer see cursed spirits as holy, and therefore should hypothetically have no issue with humanity exercising them. So the TLDR of it all, that is to say the Harmony Ritual, is that Maru augmented the pathway of souls that he was having a conversation with Yuji in the pathway of souls that Mahito lived in to change the biology of every person born from this moment on to no longer produce cursed energy, at least not at the level that Japanese people currently produce, which means the entire world will produce the infinitesimally small amount of cursed energy that they need in order to survive, which is lightly akin to what's produced by people overseas. However, none of the people who are currently alive right now will have their cursed energy stripped away from them, unless of course you just so happen to be a cursed spirit, because all cursed spirits have had their souls reconfigured to produce the least amount of cursed energy possible, and because they're made out of cursed energy, they basically just die. And no species from this moment on will have the same soul color. Well, yes, as it currently stands, Cimmerians still have the same soul color as the Kalyans they brought with them to Earth. Cimmerians born from this moment on will not. So every Cimmerian from this moment on won't be able to have the bond with Kalyans that the current Cimmerians have. Good. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's get into the chapter. Chapter 24 opens with us seeing cursed spirits beginning to fade away until they're nothing but skeletons as their orbs float above them up towards the sky. And we see these thousands of light orbs floating up towards the sky from Tokyo, presumably to the passageway of souls. And we see Cross still in his hospital gown with his hair everywhere, staring out over the scene with tears flowing from his third eye. Now, this is obviously different from how we just saw Cross in Chapter 23, as the iteration of Cross we saw in Chapter 23 was the iteration version of Cross we've always seen, but seemingly seeing Cross still in his hospital gown with his hair all undone shows us that the Cross, Yuka, and Tsurugi that were actually floating alongside Maru were brought to Maru in more of a metaphysical sense, most likely by his ability. And thus, while they may have used all of their cursed energy together to make this global phenomenon occur, seemingly Cross never left his hospital room. On the next page, we see Miyaguni interacting with these orbs of light, and she's staring at them pensively as she says, "This isn't like a regular eradication. It's like their souls are peacefully passing on to the next life." And seemingly that's exactly what's happening. Majulo established to us that cursed spirits have souls. Well, less that they have souls and more that they act as places for souls to gather. And because technically at the core of cursed spirits is a soul, when a cursed spirit is eradicated, that soul does head to the afterlife. But now it's seemingly happening in a more gentle way. We then see Yuji walking out of Tokyo with his patented, apparently, hands in his pocket as he talks to himself, which is another thing that he's been doing a lot of recently, but I guess he's been alone for a while. So, he actually did it, huh? He steeled himself and gathered his resolve. Now, obviously, the changing of everybody's souls in order to make sure that they no longer produce cursed energy is something that Yuji identified as a gigantic sin, as stripping humanity of cursed energy would strip them of the possibility down the line of using cursed energy as an alternative energy source. And yet, even though Yuji identified that it was a massive sin, he told Maru he was willing to bear the weight of that burden if Maru needed. However, after the conclusion of chapter 23, both Maru and Yuji came to the conclusion that they would do what they could do by themselves. Yuji would get the future generations ready for battle against cursed spirits without cursed energy, and Maru would make a world with substantially less cursed energy. Now, as to how Yuji is going to accomplish his side of the deal, we can't say. And this chapter does not give us the answers to that question. However, it does give us the answers to what happened to Mahoraga, because on the next page, we see Mahoraga's 8-handled wheel clattering to the ground as Yuka bolts awake. And as she opens her eyes, we see that at her feet, Mahoraga's wheel is beginning to fade away. Now, what does this mean? Does this mean that Mahoraga, like all of the other cursed spirits, was taken out by this eradication launched by Maru? Or does it simply mean that because Yuka was technically dead and now Dabra is outside of the range of Mahoraga and Dabra's contract to fight each other to the death, that Mahoraga simply returned back to the Shikigami realm? Well, we unfortunately can't really say. See, because both scenarios are kind of equally likely. See, Mahoraga is a Shikigami and therefore is entirely comprised of cursed energy, and therefore should technically be subject to Maru's attack. Compositionally, there's really no difference between Mahoraga and a cursed spirit. And if Maru was trying to eradicate all cursed energy in Japan, well, Mahoraga probably had the most cursed energy out of anything in Japan, so eradicating him would have been a pretty good idea. However, there's also the possibility that with Yuka in a suspended state of death, floating in her own shadow, and Dabra now light years away, sent back to Samaria, that Mahoraga realized that everybody was fighting against in its subjugation ritual was now gone. And if everybody involved in Mahoraga's subjugation ritual is either dead or outside of the bounds of said subjugation ritual, well then Mahoraga would head back to wherever Shikigami come from. Now, does this mean that Mahoraga is gone forever? I'm gonna say no. Yes, we see Mahoraga's 8-handled wheel begin to fade away at the end of this page. However, that's not the first time we've seen Mahoraga's 8-handled wheel be destroyed. As after Gojo hit his final purple in his battle against Sukuna, it blew up with such an amount of force that it destroyed not only Mahoraga, but also his wheel. And while some of you are saying, but Nick, Mahoraga also died 2 times prior than that, so for sure he can't be gone this time. Yeah, good point. Because Mahoraga was not only killed once, but twice by Sukuna. The first time being during the Shibuya incident, and the second time being off-screen when Sukuna summoned Mahoraga to subjugate him. Considering the fact that Yuka had summoned Mahoraga for a subjugation ritual, him dying doesn't really affect him. See, well, yes, if a Shikigami of a 10 Shadow user dies while under the Shikigami user's control, they can never use that Shikigami again. However, that Shikigami does have to die at least once in order to be subjugated by the 10 Shadow user, and that Shikigami can die as many times as it takes until eventually the 10 Shadows user is able to kill that Shikigami by themselves. And consider the fact that it takes the cursed energy of the 10 Shadow user to summon a Shikigami, and not the Shikigami's cursed energy itself. Even if Mahoraga had all of its current cursed energy taken by Maru's Harmony ritual, there's a fair or decent chance that if Yuka ever wanted to try again, she probably could. So is Mahoraga dead? No? Probably not. But also, I mean, it wouldn't matter if it was. Curse spirits are gone, and curse users are gonna be gone in like 70 years. But if all you Mahoraga bros can't sleep tonight because you're afraid Mahoraga may be gone forever, I'll put your hearts at ease. I don't think that he is. I mean, he'll probably never be used again, but he could be. Anyways, on the next page, we see Yuka sitting up and rubbing the back of her head, presumably where her tumors were. As she says, as a smile begins to creep on her face, "It doesn't hurt," implying that Yuka has been completely healed by Maru's technique. And once again, I know some of you are gonna say, oh, Maru's technique is a complete and total asshole, but if you want to get upset about Maru's technique, you should have got upset about it the second that it was introduced, as the precedent for him doing something like this was established the second we saw that he was able to control entropic forces. Dying is giving into entropy. Taking medicine and healing yourself is a battle against entropy. If Maru can control entropy, he can control death. It's broken, I'm aware, but he's also an alien with 3 eyes, and he piloted a mothership he made by holding hands with his brother several light years to get to Earth. I will once again reiterate, this is not out of nowhere, it is not an ass pull, it has been set up this entire time. But if you're not reading the story you're flipping through, yeah, I could see how this kind of thing would come as a surprise. Anyways, at the bottom of this page, we see Maru with tears still streaking down from his third eye, seemingly reaching down to somebody. And on the next page, we see Tsurugi looking at his future wristwatch bracelet thing. I don't know, it's what Apple Watch wishes it was. And from off screen, we hear somebody ask, "Yuka, is that you?" And from Tsurugi's bracelet says, "Yes, it's me." We then see Maru in the next panel helping Tsurugi up as he says, "Well then, let's go home." And Tsurugi, with a grimace on his face as he gets up, says, "Yeah, all right." And on the next page, we flash away from Tsurugi and Maru back to Samiria, as Dabra has returned. And listen, we have no concept of time here. Sure, maybe Maru is able to teleport Dabra and his brother, apparently, actually. Fan translations have been saying sister. I just read the official translation. It says brother. But anyway, sure, maybe Dabra and his brother were immediately transported back to Samiria faster than the speed of light. Or maybe it took them years to get all the way back like it took Samirians years to get to Earth. We have no way of knowing. There's no acknowledgement of any passage of time. So don't get up in arms about how Maru's got instant teleportation abilities or something like that. That has not been established at all. It could have taken years. But all that does matter is that the first thing that Dabra does after returning to Samiria is pay his father a visit. And his father, an elderly Samirian with a long beard and huge third eye, simply stares at the daunting figure of his son with abject horror, while draped in 2 women. We then on the next page see Dabra destroying what appears to be the Diskunte chieftain's palace with a barrage of light-based attacks. But seemingly the chieftain's bedroom is left untouched, as the chief tries to run away from Dabra by shoving himself back onto his bed while the 2 women that were with him, well, they leave. And while the chieftain tries fruitlessly to run away from his now overpowered son, he yells, "What? Why? Wait, no, if you come any closer, Spajo will die." Yeah, that's right, just try touching me. Your brother will die. But it's at this moment that Spajo takes his hood off, as he urges his father to just try to kill him. And it's at this moment in time that the Diskunte chieftain realizes that the curse that he's placed on Spaju has been broken, obviously by the Black Rope, which has the ability to nullify any curse techniques it comes into contact with. And in the next page, we see absolute chaos in the Diskunte clan as they're running away from the debris falling from the destroyed palace. But as all of them are focused on the crown jewel of their city crumbling to ashes, Dabra walks against the grain of the crowd, and some of the Diskunte begin to recognize him. And once he has the attention of all of the members of his clan, he throws his father's head and lets it be known that from this moment on, I am the chieftain of the Diskunte. And as he says this, we see Spajo consoling the 2 women that were with the now ex-chieftain as they all stand next to the smoldering debris that was where the ex-chieftain was sitting. Now, immediately after Dabra lets all of his clansmen know that he is the new chieftain, they all take a knee. And Dabra lets all of them know, now that he's got all of their attention, that the first thing that they'll do as the Diskunte clan is build a grave for Dura. and enshrine him as a warrior. And after that's done, well, he's gonna step down as chieftain because he doesn't know politics all that well and he doesn't want to be in charge. And he does this with a blush on his face, and while it catches all of the Diskunte clan off guard, they all begin to laugh. Now, for anyone being like, what, I thought Dabra was gonna rule over the Diskunte clan with an iron fist for the rest of his life. Once again, you haven't been reading. Dabra, while incredibly powerful, is a soft-spoken introvert. He was forced into becoming the hammer of the Diskunte clan by his abusive chieftain father, who was using his death curse on Spajo to force Dabra to do basically whatever he wanted. However, Dabra ran away from Cimmeria just like all of the Lumer tribesmen. And while he said he did it in order to honor the memory of Dura, his best friend, at the end of the day, also getting out from under the oppressive thumb of his father was a big part of his decision-making process. I mean, this is the guy who didn't understand what it was to be a warrior until he fought against Mahoraga, the person who took it easy on his best friend because he didn't want to mess up his face in a death battle. His entire life he's been motivated by one thing and one thing alone, and that is keeping his little brother safe. He's never had aspirations to lead, and until recently, he never really had aspirations to become a warrior. While he was with the Lumerians, well, yes, he was their strongest pawn to be used really whenever they wanted, a bargaining chip that could have forced humanity into subjugation. He actively took himself out of the conversation when it came to discussing the political connection between the Lumerians and humanity, stating that because he didn't have a connection to the Kalyans on account of the fact that he wasn't a Lumerian, that he shouldn't have a say on as to whether or not humanity should be able to destroy cursed spirits. You can't be surprised by him not wanting to be chieftain. He hardly wanted to be a steward. We then go to the next page where apparently the Lumer tribesmen are holding a high council meeting, and we see that their mothership is now permanently landed in the destroyed Tokyo, taking on the appearance of maybe the world's tallest building. And we see that Maru and Cross are telling all of the Cimmerians about what they did in the Ritual of Harmony, as they tell them all that the cursed spirits of Earth housed a soul that was the same color of that of the Kalyans, and therefore what we heard were the voices of the souls of that color. And thus the reason that those of the Lumer tribe cried from the third eye when a cursed spirit was exorcised wasn't because the cursed spirits were actually Kalyans, but apparently because they have a deep connection to souls of that color. However, with Maru's ritual, the color of souls has now been scattered, and therefore Lumer tribesmen will no longer confuse the Kalyan with cursed spirits. However, one problem does come with that, and it's a problem we talked about earlier. See, with the scattering of the colors of souls, Kalyan will no longer recognize the Lumer tribesmen, and therefore future generations of the Lumer tribe won't be recognized by Kalyans as their equals, which means that future generations of the Lumer tribe will be attacked and possibly devoured by the Kalyans, the beings they view as holy. Cross continues on by saying that while Kalyan reproduction has not been confirmed in the last 100 years, that is to say that a new Kalyan has not been born in the last 100 years, Cross wants to hear the opinion of all of the members of the Lumer tribe's High Council about what they should do with the 52 Kalyan that are aboard their mothership right now. Now, obviously, this idea of the Kalyan attacking and devouring all future iterations of the Lumer tribe sets off some of the more conservative types in the High Council, as they begin screaming at Maru and Cross, saying they should be tried for their crimes against their tribe. But Jabarama tries to take their side, telling them that the new world that they found themselves in may seem like hell, but this is a necessary change. But this just draws the attention of all the infuriated council members onto Jabarama. But Kurt Cobain, who apparently survived the Black Flash from Yuji, tells everybody to shut up, saying that there's a lot of things he would like to say, but he's waiting to hear out Cross and Maru. And thus Cross continues and says, I was honestly hesitant to take the life of the Kalyans alongside the cursed spirits. See, if Kalyan devour our children, we cannot maintain the same relationship with them. See, if that is a possibility, it would be better to treat them like livestock, or possibly eradicate them as wild beasts. But I didn't believe it was up to me to make that choice, so I leave it up to you. How should we treat the Kalyans? But before we get an answer in that regard, we get to the final page of chapter 24, where we see Yuji walking through what appears to be a gigantic library. But this gigantic library is actually the Gojo family storehouse, which is revealed as we see Yuji walk up to what's left of Panda, as Panda greets Yuji by saying, "It's been a while, Itadori. Now, what is Yuji doing in the Gojo family storehouse, and what does it have to do with Panda? Well, if I had to take a guess, it seems as though Gege is finally going to finish Principal Yaga's storyline. See, one of the biggest complaints that a lot of people had about JJK was the introduction of cursed corpses. What do you mean we introduced the concept of being able to animate corpses through Principal Yaga and then never did anything more with that concept than making Panda? But consider the fact that Yuji said that he would take it upon himself to ensure that Japan had defenders against cursed spirits for the rest of time, and cursed energy is going to disappear with this next generation. It would seem as though Yuji needs to find a way to create immortal soldiers who can fight against the 5 or so cursed spirits that generate every single year. And how is he going to do that? Well, seemingly cursed corpses. And thus, well, be as mad about this chapter as you want to because Maru's ability is an asshole. You can't deny the fact that Majulo has now several times cleaned up an open plot thread that was left by the ending of JJK. So if you felt as though the introduction of cursed corpses was pointless, like I did, then it seems as though Gege is about to give you exactly what you were looking for, justifying the research that Principal Yaga lived and died for. And I personally think that's awesome. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Did you like chapter 24? Do you see where Gege is going? Do you think he's cooking? Do you think he's burning his food? And do you think that JJK fans' reading comprehension is getting worse by the week? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I just want to work on my car so badly.